Okay, it says we are now live again. Thank you everyone for coming back and joining us again for a fourth day here. Really excited about today. We have Cameron Cushman from Health Science Center and from SparkYard, who is going to chat with us a little bit about startups, entrepreneurship in this time for our country. We spent a lot of time talking about small business and SBA loans and funding and different things like that. But what if you are that entrepreneur, that startup, and you're trying to make your way and get to the next step in the stage of your company, and what resources are you there for you right now? Or if you want to start something up, well, what does that look like? So wanted to bring Cameron on to talk a little bit about what he's been working on. What are some of those resources, who to reach out to if you fall into that category. So same as we've done the last few days here, please feel free to email in or just put on Facebook those questions, or if you're logged into our Zoom here, go ahead and put it in the Q&A or the chat so that we can answer those questions. With that, I'll turn it over to Cameron, let him kind of give a background on what he's been working on, some of the information he's seen, and then we'll start answering some questions for you. So Cameron, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Chris. Really glad to be here today. And, like all of us, we're working from home too. So we'll see how it goes here today. But if you can't hear me or anything, just let me know. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I do have some slides I want to talk through and some resources to share with you guys. But if I could stress one thing today, it's that there are lots of resources available for startups and small businesses. But the only way you can access those resources is to access those resources. And so lots of resources are available, but it's really up to you as a startup, as a small business, to figure out how to access those resources. And that's really what we're going to talk about today. And then at the end, we're going to kind of zoom out a little bit, and we're going to talk about what this means from a very level standpoint of the overall economy. And we're also going to talk a little bit about what the previous economic downturns can teach us about what might be in the future. It's impossible to know the future, but we can hopefully learn some lessons from what's happened in the past. So with that, let me just share my screen really fast. And I hope this comes up all right.
Yep, we see it.
Okay, so I'll go to slide. Okay, there we go. Does that look good?
It does.
Okay, so the first thing I want to highlight today is a resource that we have put together along with TCU and the city of Fort Worth. And we have basically got a group and a platform of resources from Kansas City. There's a group up there called SourceLink that started out of the University of Missouri, Kansas City. And they saw this real need for startups and small businesses to find a way to access the resources that already existed in their communities. Many times communities had resources, but nobody knew where they were. A lot of these the resources are free and they don't have marketing budgets, so people don't know about them. And it was very difficult for startups and small businesses to find these guys. So they put together a platform called SourceLink to help entrepreneurs and small businesses navigate their own entrepreneurial journey using the local resources that were already available to them. So if you think about this, they were kind of playing traffic cop. They're kind of pointing people which way to go. Stop here, you need to go to this resource. Oh, you're a little bit further along. Here's where every company's different, every journey's different, every industry's different. So this is the way to, this is the map that you can follow to go down your own entrepreneurial journey. We brought that to Fort Worth last summer with a hard launch back in August, or soft launch back in November. So this is a brand new tool, brand new resource that we're still building and still getting to know. We wanted to make sure that you know about it. We rebranded it and called it SparkYard when we brought it to Fort Worth. As you guys all know, the stockyards was the first big place of commerce in our city. And every company needs a spark, right? Whether you have that idea or you're trying to get to the next level of growth, a spark is something that a lot of businesses need. So if you put those two together, we came up with SparkYard. So here's a little bit about the mission of SparkYard. And as I mentioned, this is really about connecting the entrepreneurs to the resources that they need, and all the while trying to grow our entrepreneurial community and our entrepreneurial ecosystem into one that reflects and follows our growth as now being the 13th largest city in the country, which now makes the city of Fort Worth larger than the city of San Francisco, which is just kind of hard to believe. So why is Because typically, like every other entrepreneurial ecosystem in the world, outside of maybe Silicon Valley or Boston or a couple of others, you have silos. These resources are here, but they're scattered. Entrepreneurs don't know how to put them together like you'd put together a puzzle. What if we had a resource to help entrepreneurs assemble their own puzzle and complete the picture for their business? There's also, we've tried to do this in the past through various mind map exercises, and it just ends up looking like the image at the bottom left there, where you just have so much going on, it's impossible to navigate. The other thing is, there was no central hub for events that are going on to help connect people, educate people, and get them the resources that they need. So we try to put all this together in one central calendar. Obviously, since just about everything on everybody's calendar has been canceled, the calendar is not really that relevant today, but I just wanted to highlight it and make sure that you all know that it exists. As I mentioned, SparkYard was started with 3 partners in mind. I work at the UNT Health Science Center. My colleague, Marco Johnson, is actually the one who runs this program. So if you have direct contact with SparkYard, you'll be interacting with hopefully both of us at some point, but definitely Marco. The Neely School at TCU, and the City of Fort Worth and their Economic Development Group. So let me just give you a quick overview of the website. So you can see the resources are all listed here, and this slide's a little bit old. We're now pushing in on about 50 different resources that are all available. You can search them there, lots of different search criteria you can use, and then that will help you figure out, without having to do anything else, you can do this at midnight in your PJs, figure out what kind of resources you might want to access. But there's also a way you can go through SparkYard and get more of a referral process that can help turn that kind of cold call into a warm or a hot lead. So we'll talk about that in a second about how to do that. And but we're trying to aggregate these resources here so that you can use them to go down your own entrepreneurial journey. The website is sparkyard.co. You'll hear me say that several times. It's not .com. There's no M, sparkyard.co. We have also, in response to the COVID-19 and the coronavirus, we have now put together a special page on our website for all the resources in Tarrant County and the surrounding communities. A lot of communities have done this. The Chamber has one. We have put this together on SparkYard just to make sure that we have a lot of places where you can find this information. We're also trying really hard to go out and find some private sector stuff. You know, a lot of people have the SBA stuff and the state government stuff. But there was an announcement yesterday by Facebook that they are going to open up $100 million of assistance to small businesses, both through, I think, direct assistance and also free Facebook ads. So go to our website and you can find resources like that. AT&T had a big announcement the other day. I think they're opening up about $10 million of assistance for people affected by Corona. And we hope that there are going to be more of these big public and private companies that'll be coming to offer resources during these difficult times for small businesses. We are updating this daily. Every time I see something on social media, hey, Marco, put this on the website. He's probably sick of hearing from me, but the good news is we're trying to capture as many of these as we can, and I think we've done a good job of that so far. If you know of any resources that need to be on this site, please send them to us through the website. Chris has my email, or we can find a way to share it again in the future. One of the things that SparkYard also does is it can put together a customized action plan, a personal action plan for you and your business. If there's a specific problem that you are struggling with, if there is a specific resource that you're looking for that you can't find in the resource navigator, if you need help, if you need a plan, whatever it is, submit on here for your free personal action plan. It is at no cost. And it'll include both free resources and paid resources, depending on how you want to do it. It also, this is where you can get this kind of warm referral instead of just a cold lead or just a random email address. So no matter what kind of stage company you're in, it's always important to try to get to the next level. And this is where an action plan can really help. We do provide it in a written plan or a written format, but we're always helpful to talk through it over the phone or maybe a Zoom call. We're probably not going to meet in person in the current circumstances, but we try to have a 1 to 2 day turnaround on this, and you'll get customized feedback based on your needs specifically. And today only, or maybe we'll extend it until the end of the week, if you call the SparkYard hotline, which we'll talk about in a minute, and request your customized action plan, we will send you a free SparkYard t-shirt hey, just because we're doing it virtually doesn't mean we can't give away door prizes, right? So let's get that hotline ringing off the hook, and let's keep Marco busy with putting together these personalized action plans. So I mentioned some more contact info here. SparkYard.co is the website. We also do run a newsletter called the Dispatch. We typically only put that out about once a month, but with all of the coronavirus stuff that's coming out, we're trying to really ramp that up and get that out more often, every few, at least once a week, if not every few days. I mentioned the hotline. If you're old school and you don't want to just email us, here is the number. So write this number down, 682-351, that number, and see if you can use resources to help you get through whatever struggle it is that you're going through. And also, you can win a free t-shirt. Admittedly, we won't mail you the t-shirt right away, but we'll put you on a list, and when things get back to normal, we will get that in the mail to you. There's also plenty of other resources that are available. Yesterday, Kim did a fantastic on this very Facebook Live event talking about SBA loans and disaster loans and what that can look like, all kinds of different resources. She's an expert on that. So that's the kind of resource that SparkYard can point you to and the Chamber can point you to, but that is all available on the site. So go back to resources like that. There's gonna be more resources coming up here in the very near future, and I wanna go ahead and point two of them out. One of them is going to be hosted by Darlisa Dilt. She's a fantastic entrepreneurial ecosystem builder here in the area. She runs a group called the North Texas Entrepreneur and Education Training Center, and she is hosting this call tomorrow at 1:30. And you can either find Darlisa on LinkedIn or social, or go to their website, and you can sign up for this specifically. Darlisa is a former SBA expert, so she knows a lot about this stuff. So that is certainly another thing that you can plug into. Also, TechNest, Tech Fort Worth runs this program every Tuesday night, and they have now gone all digital. So they had all these speakers scheduled throughout the spring, and they have all gone digital now. This one is actually this afternoon, 4:30 to 6. You can hear from Susan Sledge. She is a serial entrepreneur. And so tune in there on the Tech Fort Worth website, or wherever you consume these events. You can click here and learn more. Again, that starts at 4:30 and will run until about 6 tonight. So know about that. And those are every Tuesday night for the foreseeable future. Hayden Blackburn and his team do a fantastic job events, and I think you'll really enjoy it. So tune in tonight and in future weeks. So the last part I want to go to is to kind of zoom out a little bit. These are extremely uncertain times, and any economist will tell you that about previous recessions, everybody says, well, you know, this time it really is different, right? We've never had the banks collapse like this. We've never seen a real estate failure like this. We've never seen a dot-com. We never had dot-coms to then have dot-coms fail. But maybe this time it really is different. I think this one is affecting everybody across the board. I'm working from home. You're working from home. Restaurants are shut down. All kinds of shut down. And that's happening all around the world. This is not an industry-specific problem. This is not a country-specific problem. This is really happening across the board. But I do want to just try to give a glimmer of hope here and not be all negative Nancy. There is going to be some pent-up demand. There is going to be a surge of economic activity. When we get back to normal, which could be a week or two, or it could be a month, it could be longer. We have no idea. And I wish I had an answer to make those projections, make that more certain. But it is going to get better, and people are going to be so sick of being at home that all your restaurants are going to fill up, and sales are going to go through the roof. So if you can hang on through this tough patch, it is going to get better eventually, because it always does. And even though this one may be different, it's not going to be that different. We're all going to be able to survive in one shape or form. I pulled this from an article that a former colleague of mine had written in Forbes just a couple of days ago. And I love this last line. He says it talks about it's V-shaped, right? So we are definitely in the steep decline period now. But you know what? There is going to be a sharp rebound coming back. And we all have to remember that even though we don't know where the bottom's going to be, we don't know how far we're going to fall, we don't know how bad those markets are going to look, eventually they're going to come back. So I hope that gives you at least a little bit of a glimmer of hope. So I wanted to zoom way out to some past recessions. This same colleague of mine wrote a paper called um, the I think it's something like the economic future just happened. And what he is trying to say is that there is a huge correlation between economic downturns and quick rise of particularly of startup companies, right? And a lot of these startup companies, some of them are going to fail, like a lot of startup companies do. Some of them are going to plug along and just be very successful, small businesses, Main Street businesses, whatever you want to call them. But some of these are going to turn into the next Fortune 500 companies, right? So one of the questions I want us to be asking ourselves in Fort Worth is, how do we create the next Alcon, the next Mucinex that was started right here in East Fort Worth? How do we become the next Radio Shack? What does that look like? What can we learn from our recent past that can help set us up for the future? So half of the current Fortune 500s, these are the 500 biggest companies in the US, were founded during a recession or a bear market. And you can see in the graph over here, the gray areas are the economic downturns. Those are the recessions. So typically it's happened about every 7 to 8 years. We've gone about 10 years since the last one, the sort of 2008, 2009 decline. Before that, it was the early 2000s. So you can tell that there's about 8 years of growth and then about 2 years of retraction, give or take. But out of so even just in those 2 years, half the Fortune 500 have grown out of those times. So they're responding to a need, they're filling a market that doesn't exist before, they're taking an opportunity, and they're starting companies, right? And it's companies that Microsoft, Intel, Dell, Home Depot, Staples, Charles Schwab, and a slew of others were all started during economic downturns. I just looked this up and I don't have the data back this far, but Alcon was actually started in 1945, which if you know your history, yeah, we were coming out of World War II at that point, but that's also the year that World War II ended. So I would wager that would have been on the list as well. That we had a company that started an economic downturn. The other thing I want to highlight out of this chart too is what happens to job creation. So you see how the job creation goes way down, obviously, because a lot of people lose their jobs. That we're already seeing that just in the few weeks that coronavirus has really hit our country. But look at this. Look at how it bounces back. Right. This is what Dane Stengler was talking about in these V-shaped curves. It goes way down. It's dramatic. It's scary. It's frustrating. But then it bounces back really, really fast. We have a very resilient economy in this country. And thank goodness, but we do have some ups and downs. This is just the business cycle at play. But startups do create a lot of these jobs, which we'll talk about in a second. So this shows you how Fortune 500, these companies that grow to be these large behemoth household name companies, have grown out of downturns. But what about smaller companies? What about new companies? What does this look like in the recent past? So he also did a similar analysis on Inc. 5000. So Fortune has the biggest companies. Inc. has the fastest growing companies. And these companies literally be on this list like 1,000% over a 3-year period. And the top ones are 47,000%. I mean, it's like hard to even imagine how fast these companies grow. But similarly, half of the Inc. 5000 were founded during a recession or a bear market. And a lot of this analysis was done after the last recession, which was 2011, 2012, which is why you're seeing some older numbers here. But I thought that was instructive because this is the last relevant period. We've been on a economic growth tear for the last decade. So you got to go back to the last recession to kind of see what we can learn about future recessions. So in 2008, 2009, and this is just fascinating. This just blew my mind. Here are some of the companies that were started during that period: Airbnb, Uber, WhatsApp, GitHub, Slack, Square, Stripe, and many others. Yammer, a bunch of other companies came out of this period. Now, think about that for a second and step back. In 2008, you have rented a night on some stranger's couch? No. Would you have gotten in someone's car and gotten a ride from them? Somebody you've never met? No. And we didn't even really have iPhones that could do that at that point, right? So these companies, it's such an overused word in startup culture, but these companies really disrupted our economy in ways that nobody saw coming. And they changed human behavior. And that's the other thing that I think is super important. we all still do a lot of email, but think about how much most of us are on Slack all the time. We're right now on Zoom and Facebook. Those are just incredible platforms that didn't exist not too long ago. So what I want to leave you with on this is, what are the companies now that don't exist that will get started out of this economic downturn? And then what's Fort Worth's role going to be in that? Are we going to launch the next one of those? Insert that name now. One of the things that is really interesting is that recession is actually really good for entrepreneurship rates, because people lose their jobs. They get the opportunity to pursue that passion that they've always had, that thing that they've been tinkering with in the garage, that piece of code that they think they might have a business in. All of a sudden they get that pink slip, a virus hits, a pandemic's on, they find themselves with tons of free time, and maybe they can go and pursue that. Maybe they get a severance package, so they have some seed capital. Maybe they go cash in that 401k to fund the initial development of that business. So how do we think about how we can grow this next group of startups right here in Fort Worth? And I also want to point out too, with the relate to job creation, which is how most policymakers think about these things. They all think about it in terms of jobs. And if you look at this chart on the right, from 77 to 2005, almost all net new job creation in the country came from firms less than 5 years old. So it was new companies that were creating jobs. The existing companies destroy just as many jobs as they create, particularly in times like this. But if you think about a startup, today that company doesn't exist. I start a company, I have created one job. All a startup company can do is inherently grow, right? So how do we continue to make sure that the companies that are going to get started, we don't even know who they are yet. We don't even know what industries they're going to be in. How do we make sure we set the right business climate for them to start and to grow and to access the resources that they need at the right time in their development, so that hopefully we can end up with the future Airbnb or the future WhatsApp right here in Fort Worth. So I know the question you're all asking is, what about my business, right? So here's just thoughts from Cameron. And this doesn't necessarily represent thoughts of the chamber or the health science center or anybody else. This is just, hey, I've been doing entrepreneurship for a while now. What could this mean for my business? So I think the first question you have to ask, and again, I'm not trying to be negative here, is, are we going to weather the storm? Or is this an opportunity to just fail fast? Hey, maybe it really wasn't working. Maybe it's time to just close up shop and go do something else. Let's put our energy somewhere else. Most of you are going to weather the storm and you're going to be just fine. It's just going to be a rocky road to get there. The second thing is, if you're not trying to access all the resources that are available to you, then you're doing something wrong. This is where SparkYard comes in handy, the Chamber, Fort Worth City's Economic Development Group, the Gwynn campus, and all the resources are associated there. Use those resources. They are for you. We are all rooting for you as a community, and we've created these resources for you to use. So please take advantage of that. The next thing, right? Who knows how this is impacting your business, right? But you got to make the most of it. I've been so proud of not only the startup community, but also just some local Fort Worth businesses. And I'll give you two examples of this. One is, we're all out of hand sanitizer. So what did our distilleries do? They started making hand sanitizer. Making gin and making Purell is not that different, right? And they have the capacity to do it, and they can flip a switch and all of a sudden start making sanitizing products. And we've seen Wild Acre and some others doing that. And that's just fascinating to me. What a cool pivot. What a way to solve a problem, which is what entrepreneurs are really good at. Keep your employees employed and hopefully continue to make a little bit of money along the way. It's probably not as much as a bottle of gin, but you're also solving a huge problem that we have in our supply chain right now. The other one that I love is Melt Ice Cream. They are running a campaign where you can buy ice cream through Melt, and they will take it and deliver it to hospital workers. So all the people that are taking care of all the sick people that we're all anticipating are going to end up here in the near future in intensive care in the hospital, those poor people are going to have some really rough days. And Melt Ice Cream wants you to be able to buy happiness for them. They're going to show up and deliver Melt Ice Cream to those people. So what are some creative ways where you can not only help our community, but also continue business operations in a very different, but maybe a more normal way? How can you make lemons out of your ice cream company, right? And that's exactly what Melt has done. Prepare for the pent-up demand on the other side. We are going to all be so sick of being at home that restaurants and all kinds of businesses, trampoline parks, I got 3 kids, all those places are just going to explode when we all get to go back to our normal lives again. use this time wisely, right? That's the one commodity we all seem to have a ton of. What can you do to prepare? What are those projects that maybe you've been putting off? Writing that marketing plan, strategically thinking about a growth area, cleaning up that back storage room in your office, or what are those projects that you need to do and take care of that you don't want to do them, but now you've got the time for them finally? Use this time wisely to help with that. I know a lot of you, and particularly in the entrepreneurial community, you just can't help it. You all have a side hustle. You all have another idea. Well, now's the time to do it. Write that business plan. Focus your energy on doing something else, whether it's a side hustle or something that helps your business through maybe a side project or a white label brand or whatever that may be. Try to move that ball forward, because time is what we have now. And look for opportunities, right? I don't know where Wild Acre got the idea that they could make hand sanitizer, but they saw the opportunity, they flipped the switch, and they have made that happen. And I'm sure they're not the only local distillery that's doing that either. But what are some of those opportunities that, in a really unique kind of way, your company could potentially fill or serve or something like that? And finally, I'm going to leave you with some thoughts around what policymakers should do. So a lot of what you're going to hear is hearing out of Washington. The Fed is stimulating the economy. We're going to have some big funding bills coming our way. All those are good, and there's going to be a lot of resources for small businesses and entrepreneurs just like you guys. But we also have to think about entrepreneurs. It's too easy to just give away tax credits to more big companies and things like that. But how do we continue to keep entrepreneurs in the front of our mind? How do we keep small businesses, the Melt Ice Creams of the world, who all of a sudden went from having 3 shops in the Metroplex to nobody coming in their doors anymore? How do we keep them in mind as we design the policies of the future? And this is a really tricky one. There's a lot of these companies that haven't even been invented yet, and they're all going to come out of, or a lot of them are going to come out of this economic downturn for the reasons we just talked about. How do you keep those guys in mind and try to plan for the future for them? I also mentioned too, Alcon, Radio Shack, big companies were started here. How do we plan for the next generation of those? How do we use this as an opportunity to fill gaps in our entrepreneurial ecosystem? I was in Denver a few weeks ago when we could still travel, and I asked about how many accelerator programs they had. This is a Techstars, Y Combinator type of program, very kind of Silicon Valley oriented towards high growth companies that are raising money. I said, how many do you guys have in Denver? So I've got about 12. Well, we have 0 in Fort Worth. And I'm not saying that's the magic answer, but that's a huge gap in our ecosystem. That's not even an option for entrepreneurs here. How do we identify some of those gaps and try to address those during this critical time? I think we should double down on existing assets. Guys, Tech Fort Worth, a lot of the SparkYard, Accelerate DFW, a lot of these resources that are already available for entrepreneurs and startups are here, but they have small staffs. They can't offer near enough programming for the demand we're going to see when a lot of these new companies pop up now that we're the 13th largest city in the country. So how do we expand their budgets? How do we get them more help, more people, more resources to do what they're already doing really, really well? Capital access is always an issue. I think the capital is out there, but it's not just about freeing up more venture or anything else. It's also about educating the startups to be wise about what you're asking for and how to do a good pitch, how to have those investor meetings. So we got a lot of work to do on that, but it's always an interesting one because you hear from the investor side, there's plenty of capital available, but then you hear from the startup side, oh, there's not enough capital available. So they can't both be wrong. I think they're both a little bit right, and we need to try to find ways to bring those two together. And the last thing is there's a lot of really big companies here in Fort Worth and in the Metroplex, and they don't really play in the startup world. So engage them and get them to become customers of these startups, make seed investments, run programs. There's a lot of ways that big companies can help bring our entire community back together and harness the power, particularly of job creation, that startups can bring to our economy. So, Chris, I'm done talking. We got any good questions?
The first question I have is, can I drink this hand sanitizer that's coming from the distillery?
It probably won't taste very good, but it'll definitely clean your mouth out.
Gin's never been my favorite anyways, but yeah. All right, so
more of a whiskey town anyway, aren't we?
That's right. That's right. So question number 1 is, if I am, John Q. Citizen, I've got an idea for a company. I've got a half put together business plan. what's the next step for me? Am I reaching out to you directly? Am I calling Marco? How do I get myself aligned and to make sure I'm going through the right steps?
Yeah, there are lots of great ways to do that. Tech Fort Worth has a program called Think Lab. Accelerate DFW can help with a lot of that. Fort Worth runs a business plan competition that'll be coming up soon. If you're a nonprofit, Kernel runs a business plan competition that'll be coming up. Global Entrepreneurship Week will be in November. All of those things are happening. But the best way to access the right resource for you and your startup at the right time is to run it through SparkYard. So call the SparkYard hotline, get your free t-shirt, and they will help you figure out the right way to access the right resource at the right time. And I say that too, Chris, because if you just had an idea for a business yesterday, your resources are very different than if your resource needs are very different if you're Wild Acre or if you're Melt Ice Cream, who's been selling ice cream for 5 or 6 years now and has 3 shops and 100 employees. So when we say the right resource, the right timepiece is really important because everybody's journey is a little bit different.
Great. And so, like I said, whether it's me who has never been an entrepreneur, never had a startup, or versus somebody who has a startup going on right now, call that number, and that's the best entry point for anybody thinking in this space.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Start there, and this is why we created SparkYard, was for moments like this where we don't know what's going to happen next, but resources out there that have the time and the expertise and the willingness to help. And that's why we have created this. So please, entrepreneurs and small businesses, call us, put us to work. Let the ecosystem help you grow your business and solve your problems.
That's really been the questions that have been forwarded to me both before this event and just as we're going on is, what's the starting point? Where do we go? And if you guys are the ones, then that's the best resource that we can give out to everybody, is just reach out to you and let you kind of help them navigate the ecosystem of creating the business and being successful.
That's right. And remember, we call it the resource navigator. We are not the resource itself. We are like the resource of resources, right? We're SparkYard exists to point you in the right direction. I'm not the expert on SBA loans, but your guest yesterday was. I'm not an expert on what they're going to cover at TechNest tonight, but tonight's guest is going to. So our job is to get the word out and to point people to the right direction so they can get access to what they need at the right time.
Great. Well, I really appreciate you coming on and giving us some guidance on this. And it has been extremely educational for me to listen to you and understand what the different resources are. So thank you very much.
Happy to do it. Good luck out there.
And then, yeah, thank you. And so looking forward to tomorrow, just so our audience knows, we're going to have Robert Stearns from the City Economic Development Team coming on to talk about what they're seeing. As some of you know, there is a survey out there right now that the city's been putting on, getting some more detailed information on how this is impacting businesses and then some of the resources the city is trying to put together. There's also been a lot of conversation about the shelter in place and some of the other things, essential businesses, essential employees. We're trying to work here this week to get a speaker on to talk about that, because we've seen a lot of questions about that. What does that mean for me and my business? So stay tuned, be on our Facebook, be on our social media, be looking for our emails coming out, and we're going to continue to provide some additional resources, information to you. So if any questions come up in the meantime, feel free to reach out to me, reach out to our staff, reach out to the chamber, and we'll see what we can do to support your businesses. So until tomorrow, thank you very much.